I'm Sandra, and I'm just the professional your small business was looking for. But you didn't hire me because you didn't use LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn has professionals you can't find anywhere else, including those who aren't actively looking for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role, like me.
In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you'll miss out on great candidates like Sandra. Start hiring professionals like a professional. Post your free job on linkedin.com/spoken today.
Here's a cool fact. A crocodile can't stick out its tongue. Another cool fact, you can get short-term health insurance for a month or just under a year in some states. United Healthcare short-term insurance plans are designed for people who are between jobs, coming off their parents' plan, or turning a side hustle into a full-time gig. Underwritten by Golden Rule Insurance Company, they offer flexible, budget-friendly coverage with access to a nationwide network of doctors and hospitals. Get more cool facts about United Healthcare short-term plans at uh1.com.
Finding your perfect home was hard, but thanks to Burrow, furnishing it has never been easier. Burrow's easy-to-assemble modular sofas and sectionals are made from premium, durable materials, including stain and scratch-resistant fabrics. So they're not just comfortable and stylish, they're built to last. Plus, every single Burrow order ships free right to your door. Right now, get 15% off your first order at burrow.com/ACAST. That's 15% off at burrow.com/ACAST.
Pursuing your future doesn't end at 40. In fact, it may mark the beginning of knowing who you are, what you're capable of, and what you really want. But knowing what's next and how to get there can be a challenge, especially when old narratives play on repeat. Liberty Road is here to share stories so that you can consider your possibilities, pursue your purpose, and move into your future with intention. I'm your host, Netta Jones, and we're here to listen, learn, and liberate dreams, one episode at a time. Well, hello, Liberty listeners. Welcome to another episode of Liberty Road. Today, you guys get to hear from Dr. Aprilia West. I'm excited for you guys to get her nerding out here in real time on the podcast. We're going to learn a lot together. Aprilia, welcome to the show. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Netta. I'm so glad to be here. And before we get started, I just want to say thank you so much for devoting yourself to empowering women in the middle third of life. I really believe that the cultural narrative, especially here in the United States around this time of life, has been unhelpful in so many ways. And I think your work is giving a whole new frame to what can be a very rich and generative and even transformational period of life.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. That means a ton. We don't usually start the show with something like that, and I so appreciate it. I have no doubt that you're going to add to that narrative, debunking some things and inviting us into some things. So thanks for taking the time to be with us. So you've had lots of successful careers. You are somebody that I've known for, my gosh, over 30 years, and have in that time come in and out of careers and left with a lot of success. Like, this isn't because you were trying on new hats. Tell us a little bit about that journey to becoming a psychologist and an executive coach.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of people are like, what, huh? When I tell them I've gone from politics to music to being a psychologist and executive coach and trainer. And, you know, I've definitely had several incarnations. I hope to have more. When I look back and I think about, you know, my development or my journey, it really comes down to an early fascination with human potential. And I was reflecting the other day, I really think this comes from being adopted and my non-blood related sisters and I being so different, having such different interests and temperaments. And so I got really curious at a very early age, why are we the way we are? And what's possible really? You know, how intractable or malleable are we as humans? And so in a lot of ways, I see the journey as having actually a coherent thread, which is around narrative shaping. On Capitol Hill, I was, you know, helping shape narratives around what policymakers care about and what politicians stand for as a speechwriter and press secretary. And then in music, I was a staff songwriter and artist, and I was shaping narratives about, universal life experiences that we all have and seeing those from different perspectives. And now I get to help people choose the stories that they want to live into, and how to design their lives as a psychologist and coach. So I think the real clear thread for me is just how powerful the way we story our lives is for people. Yeah. In my mind, I haven't really been doing that much differently, just in different, shapes and forms.
I completely relate to that. First, thank you for sharing that through line with us. But also I relate to it because I feel like there have been pivots and shifts and some more substantial jumps and leaps. And to me, I'm still doing the same kind of work. I'm still encouraging, empowering, enabling, some might say. And so it feels very similar. And I think for many of us, if we go back to that pool and draw from that, we can find many iterations of ourselves and the work that we feel called to do. And there is something that all these things have in common. What I love about that is then it's born of who we are versus something that's outside of ourselves. So thank you for making that connection for us.
Yeah, something essential. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like, have you ever gone back and read your journal or your diary from, I don't know, even 5, 10, 20 years ago? And you're like, wow, I'm still thinking that. I'm still feeling that.
Yes. I wish I kept a diary through the last 15 years because I was a mad, journalist for so many years. And then somewhere with all the kids, it became a little crazy. I was busy trying to document their lives and stopped documenting mine. Yeah. But I think it's a great thing to pick up again because there's, God willing, so many years ahead of us. I have to ask a question about the psychologist and the coach piece of it, because we've had psychologists on the show and we've had coaches on the show. I don't think we've had anybody who lives at the intersection of both. What was it for you that was compelling about being a psychologist was not, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but not enough, or you found some sort of interesting way to navigate that world and couple it with this other world?
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting question. I get asked this a lot because people are really curious about that and also what the difference is between therapy and coaching. And, whether in my training as a psychologist and also in coaching, the common lens for me is how I help people be well and do well. So, how do I help them thrive and also perform at a high level? As a positive psychologist, I am looking more at a full range of human experience instead of using what I think traditionally trained therapists use, which is more of a diagnostic or pathologizing lens. And I'm just looking at what are people's relative strengths and weaknesses and how do I help them step into a meaningful life. And sometimes that means looking at biological realities and managing those. If you're in therapy, can also mean looking at skills deficits. Are there sort of unhelpful behavior patterns or coping strategies that people just didn't develop along the way? Or does it mean really helping people look at what does it mean to live an authentic and meaningful life? And how do you design that, even though we're wired for safety, comfort, coherence, and certainty?
In finding a place where those two things live together or coincide, was it someone else you had seen doing this? Or was it you bringing the two worlds together and saying, this one doesn't completely fulfill my objective and this other one doesn't completely fulfill it, with whether one lacks the research or one lacks the framework? What was it that made you say, I want to live in both of these. I want to do this work?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I actually was coaching before I was trained as a clinical psychologist, and I remember feeling a little limited in what I could bring to the table. And I ended up getting trained as a mediator because I really loved just understanding how to help people humanize themselves to each other when they're in conflict. And that made me want to dive way deeper into the science that underlies our psychology and our behavior so that I would, be more skillful around helping people create the changes they wanted in their lives. But after getting trained as a clinical psychologist, I did feel that the frame of, looking for disorder or being focused on diagnosis was way too small for what I see as the potential that all of us have. And so at that point, I shifted both my practice into more of a positive psychology therapy practice, as well as going back into coaching, this time with the science of contextual behavioral research and neuroscience and learning theory, and understanding really well what helps people develop high levels of well-being and performance. So it was really, I got a lot from both. I really appreciate understanding how to think about human behavior and all the context that goes into being who we are. And I don't think a lot of coaches get that in their training. So it's sort of like I've blended together what I feel like is the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And I know a lot more coaches now are paying attention and even getting trained in psychology as a way to be more effective with their clients.
Sure. And it seems to me that a lot of people can call themselves a coach, and a lot of people can find ways to get certified. And some of those ways are very meaningful and can impact people and the world for good. And some of those can be dangerous because they're not fully equipped when they come out of whatever that coaching program is or whatever, depending on the type of coach they are. What would you say is your secret sauce? Like, what do you bring to the table? What kind of client is the ideal client for you, given your area of focus?
The first thing that came to my mind when you said that is my own life experience. Because why I highly value my training in clinical psychology and even in coaching, my own travels through the world of Washington, D.C. and politics, and then the music industry and the entertainment industry, and then also having, the hands-on experience with people who are really struggling to, even want to stay alive or be on this earth. It's just informed me, it's helped me, I think, sort of coalesce around what I believe is helpful. And, it really has reinforced a lot of the science, even before I knew what the science was, about how people are able to thrive. And I think also my own experiences with pain, I had a lot of early childhood medical trauma, and knowing what it's like to struggle and then create unhelpful stories and schemas about myself, I have a lot more empathy and just real world experience with how do you unravel those? How do you sit with discomfort and pain? And so when I'm working with clients, I always feel like we're in the boat together, and it's not something that I'm theoretically offering them or intellectualizing in some way. Like I'm having a shared human experience with them.
What a gift to those people. And your answer of your own life experience, I think, speaks to so much of what we're trying to do at Liberty. Like, what does your own life experience have to offer the world, and the way you can impact and serve others, and the way you can achieve the things you want to achieve for yourself? Like, that story, those things that have happened for you are pointing you in some direction, if only we were to pay attention. And so the fact that that is your secret sauce, the fact that that is something that you come fully equipped with in front of your clients, for your clients, on behalf of your clients, is a gift and a testament to why midlife is such a brilliant time to be starting something new and moving in a direction that you feel pulled toward. It's not a time to be, I don't believe, throwing in the towel, right?
Yeah.
No matter what societal stories we've been hearing or what societal norms we've had as examples for us.
Exactly.
I have to ask you, because you have created a workshop, thankfully for us, but it's part of the work you're doing around changing our behavior. And we're going to have that in after school. I'm excited for our members to dig into that. But what is it that you have learned about people being motivated, right? That's one of the big issues. When I talk to women, it's like, maybe it's the technology gap, right? And they're just like, I don't know if I want to start something, whether it's social media or trying to create a course for themselves or a digital sort of shopping experience, whatever it is. They just feel like the change is too hard and they are waiting for this moment where they're going to wake up fully motivated and go for it. What do you have to say to those women that are waiting for that day to arrive before they take the first step?
I think I would say, let's not set you up for failure. You know, one of my subspecialties is around emotions and motivation. And for the last 12 years, I worked on developing what I call emotion efficacy training. And a lot of people really don't understand how our emotions are related to motivation, but it's pretty simple, actually. Motivation comes from our emotions. Emotions are our primary motivational system. So that means that our level of motivation could ebb and flow or come and go in any moment, hour to hour, day to day. So if we're dependent on how we feel to take action, we won't be able to reliably do the things that matter to us. This is a big surprise for a lot of people because there's a common misconception that you need to feel motivated to make changes in your life. But the reality is, if you wait for that, you may never do the things that matter. And the good news is you can learn to move your feet in the direction you want to go and just bring those unwanted, difficult feelings with you. And this is one of the things I'll be teaching in the after-school workshop later.
I'm excited to do that workshop myself as somebody who understands that all too well. And, we hear these messages, whether it's, motivational speakers or whatever, who are saying things like, don't wait for the feelings, act, and the feelings will catch up.
Yeah.
But even that can be difficult if we're dealing with other pains, other stories that we've been telling ourselves. Perhaps they're rooted in the truth, perhaps not. What does somebody with your background who comes more fully equipped to speak into that have to say about those things? Like, how do we get past those things? Maybe our feet keep getting tripped up.
It's a great question because it sounds so simple, right? It's sort of like Nike's just do it. And yet for a lot of people, even though they want to do it, it's outside of what I call the stretch zone, right? It's just not accessible to them. And that's why a lot of the work that I do with clients is around everything from getting very clear on why it matters to then also doing an activity that I call futuring, where they're able to connect more to what it will mean for their future selves. In addition to finding other little hacks to literally just make it easier to do the behavior change. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with motivational hacks that have come out. In fact, there's some incredible books right now, Atomic Habits by James Clear, and I think it's called How to Change by Katie Milkman. And they are really great at identifying like how you can rig your environment to make it easier to do the things that you want to do. But at the end of the day, the most powerful hack you can do is just increasing distress tolerance. And that comes from acting even when you don't feel like it. And the more you do that, the easier it gets. So sometimes I'll have clients even start with things that are within their stretch zone, like, at the end of your shower, turn it to cold for 1 minute and just practice being uncomfortable. A lot of us live way more comfortable lives than is helpful, in the sense that then when we have a choice point to do something that brings discomfort, we just don't have the distress tolerance muscle for it. So there's a way to sort of build and scaffold starting small and then maybe building up to the bigger behavior change that people are finding out of reach.
First of all, that's new information for me. That's awesome. I'm going to start incorporating that. But I love that as it relates to longevity, because it seems like we're building that muscle so that we can be there for ourselves in a healthy way for a longer period of time. So again, God willing, our health is intact and we've got that time. I imagine that as things become uncomfortable as we age, aches and bones cracking and all those other things, that distress tolerance becomes something that we've built the muscle for. Am I making that up, or is there something to that?
I do think, one way that we adapt as we age is we get used to those, aches and pains and changes to this flesh suit vehicle that we're all moving around the world in. So yeah, you would naturally develop some distress tolerance, but everything is so contextual. So if you change even one thing in your environment, that distress tolerance could go out the window. It just really depends on what people's relationship with the particular emotion or the story they have about the particular action is. So it's really individualized for everyone.
It's a cool hack. It's a cool tool to know. What are some of the other things that you feel like when we talk about changing our behavior? And you don't have to get into the workshop, but what are some of the other things that perhaps our listeners, when they're thinking about, I'm in midlife, I want some sort of change in my life, I'm trying to figure out what's next, I'm trying to move in that direction, I'm trying to set my feet up for movement. What's another hack that we can do that's really about moving us in a new direction for how we're going to spend our time, perhaps our vocational yearnings, that sort of thing? Any hack or any advice for that?
Well, I think you can't become what you can't imagine. And we tend to operate within templates and scripts we already have. And so one thing that I think is helpful is encouraging people to spend time imagining something else. There was some really interesting MRI research that came out. It was in a book of one of my colleagues called Imaginable, Jane McGonigal. And she was explaining that when we try to imagine our future selves, our brain only lights up or as much as we would looking at a stranger. It's like we really don't have the neural architecture to imagine ourselves outside of the present moment unless we practice it. And so, even the act of journaling, you could use the miracle question. If you could change something about your life, what would it be? Or if money was no constraint or age wasn't a thing, what would you do right now? And then having people write into that. I think if you connect with something that really matters to you, it's going to create a sense of spaciousness. And I think so often people approach behavior change from the standpoint or context of, things I should do or need to do or stuff I need to fix about myself. And that doesn't inspire most people. A lot of the work I do in coaching and therapy is helping people shift their context from one of, what should I do or what are other people doing or what do I think I need to change in order to be something to what do you actually want to create? What's a possibility that gets you excited that you could choose because you just want to express that thing or create that thing. And usually you see a real shift in someone. I've learned what the visual tells are when someone connects with something that just naturally lights them up and gives them energy.
Gosh, if we all had access to you for a couple months, what could we be? I love that you're saying this because it validates, I guess, what we try and do here. We story tell through the podcast so that women can, as we say, consider their possibilities. As they hear and see women doing things that perhaps they didn't imagine themselves doing, they can start to, what did you call it, futuring? They can start to future themselves, if you will, and say, is there something that Aprilia said that has to do with my own talents or gifts or academic background? Is there something that she said that's giving me my own aha moment? So in seeing you, they believe that something is possible. And I think that, the more we hear about story, the more we hear about people being transparent and vulnerable and honest and all these things, we're just sharing each other's stories. And the benefit to the greater good is so much greater than the sum of its parts, is what I'm trying to say. Like the work you're doing, the storytelling that we're all doing is so life-giving. Where do you feel like maybe we fall short in the storytelling? I'll use this as, your clients. Do you feel like they don't have their story right? Do you feel like they're stuck in their story? Do you feel like their story provides a certain amount of security, even if it's a bad story?
Mm-hmm.
Where do we get stuck in those stories for ourselves?
Well, first of all, I think of stories like Spotify, right? And it's almost like we can switch around to different playlists whenever we want. And it's literally like just, streaming at any moment. Yeah. Where we get stuck with stories is some stories are helpful for where we want to go and what we want to create, and some are really unhelpful, but we don't always realize that. So often we're not aware that we're always storying our life, and that will then tell you or give you what's possible in any moment. So, a lot of the work is about awareness and then also learning how to expand the moves you make in your life. So it's really two parts, right? It's awareness of what you're doing that's not working, and then it's getting really clear on what matters most and what it would look like to move in that direction instead.
Yeah. I know you've written quite a bit. Do you have a book that speaks to any of this that we can recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, there's two things that might be helpful to listeners. One is a deck of cards, actually. It's called Act for Your Best Life. And it's 54 prompts and practices you can use to become your most psychologically flexible self. And what that means is exactly what we've been talking about, that you can learn how to harness your choices by having a more powerful relationship with your emotions. You can become more aware of the stories that are unhelpful and learn how to intentionally shift those stories. And then also figure out what really matters to you and move in that direction. If you're more of a nerd like me, you might consider the book I wrote called What You Feel Is Not All There Is. And that book talks all about our relationship with our emotions and how you can become more powerful with the some 35,000 choices that we make every day. And the idea is that you figure out how to shift from just automatically defaulting and letting your emotions sort of have you to having your emotions and figuring out how do you want to show up in your life and how do you make some of those behavior changes. So it's a whole skills training. I wrote it especially for people who might not be able to afford therapy. All the skills that I use in emotion efficacy training are in that book, along with reflections and practices.
Those are two great resources. We'll make sure to have those in the show notes. Thank you for sharing those from us. I have to ask you about the season that we're in. We are hearing so many women talk about this middle third, and for many, it can feel like the end of something, right? And in reality, some things are ending, right? If you've sent some kids off to college, that's probably the last time they're going to be in your house full time. And if they come back, you're not going to have the same parenting role, right? So some things are ending. And I think for many, as our roles change and we look to what's next for us as it relates to changing our behavior, we can feel, I don't want to say depressed, but we can at least feel at a loss. Is there a beginning point, whether it's a series of reflections or maybe it's the books you recommended, but something that's more about how do we handle change, right? How do we handle the change that is happening to us circumstantially, change that we're inviting for a variety of reasons, and how do we adjust our behavior to handle that change? Because again, it can feel like a loss.
Yeah. No, I'm really glad that you're saying that, because I think it would be really easy to be like, oh, the middle third can be so great.
Yeah.
Just step into the possibility. And the truth is, there are real losses, and that comes with a certain level of grieving. In my early 40s, it seems that my body no longer wanted me to be able to run. And that's still something to this day that I miss. And, it was such a source of release and health for me. There's grief there for me. At the same time, I feel like this period of life brings with it a lot of authenticity for a lot of women. Like a lot of women I meet at this stage are sort of like, I don't give a F what anyone thinks about me. Yeah. and they're really more clear on what matters to them. Oftentimes it comes with greater confidence. They're willing to take more risks. They care less about how, other people see them. And then for social and economic reasons, they also tend to have more free time, which means being able to start something new, being able to make changes and get the support to do that. And then, finally, I think developmentally, this time is a real time of reflection where people start to ask themselves, what do I want to create with the rest of my life? And with intention and commitment, it's often a time where people can lean way harder into what they really find meaningful in life. So I know for me at this stage of life, relationships have become way more important to me than anything else. And especially, I prioritize the relationships in my life that feel authentic and grounded and resonant. There's actually a music metaphor that I use when I think about how I people my inner pod that I'll just offer. There's a phenomenon that happens when two guitars are in tune and they're in the same room. You can pluck any string on one guitar, and the same string on the other guitar will vibrate. So when you're in sync with someone, there's a synergy where what activates you activates me and vice versa. And I pay a lot more attention to that than I used to in my friendships and relationships, and, really prioritize the people whose strings, make my strings vibrate.
I love that. I've never heard that. My two older kids are musicians. They'll love that. I'll have to share that with them. And thank you for bringing up relationships. We are focusing on relationships this season in the podcast. And I picked this theme because I hear from so many women how the change of roles that we were just talking about also means a change in relationships. Some relationships that are toxic that they need to let go of, some relationships that have timed out. They were just there for a season. It was great to be on the sidelines when our kids were growing up together, but that was what we had in common. And now we've sort of gone our separate ways. And there are those, long time relationships that we've had. I don't think I said at the front of the podcast, but we lived together in our 20s in Washington, D.C. What for you has changed or evolved in what you were looking for in your 20s and 30s, and perhaps what you began looking for in your 40s and now stepping into your 50s? What has changed for you in that?
Yeah. When I reflect on my younger self, I think that there was this sense that I needed to pick people who could help me figure out how to do life. I think it's common for younger people to select based on anything from social status to the kind of information that would help them figure out how to do life. So in some ways, I think it was more transactional for me when I was younger, even though I know that I deeply loved and cared for a lot of my friends. And now I would say that's really not in the space for me anymore. I do love a good nerding out, but other than that, it's really just more about feeling seen and heard, and humor. Humor is really important to me.
Yeah. It's the advice I give my kids. I'm like, when you're looking for friends or partner, make sure they're funny, that you think they're funny. Doesn't matter if I think they're funny. You need to think they're funny and can take things in life lightly. So find that other guitar string that plucks the same humor string, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's helpful for us to spend time thinking about what we're looking for in relationships, what we need to let go of, which is hard, but I think it's often necessary. Thank you for sharing so much of your knowledge. Thank you for offering the resources that you offered and helping us think about what change and motivation can mean for us, and a new way, a new lens to see those through. But before I let you go, we have our Fast Five. So can you share a particular something, a practice that you do daily or weekly that keeps you grounded?
I think my favorite practice is something that I started during the pandemic, actually, when I was feeling really exhausted. Doing the work I did, especially, I was not only navigating, lockdown myself, but also how it was impacting all my clients. And I started doing a sort of a morning ritual where I set aside 45 minutes before I even opened my email or started to think about work. And I would journal. I would set my intentions for the day, and when I say intentions, I don't mean goals, not actions, but more how I want to show up and what really matters to me. And then I would go through each of my client sessions and just imagine my clients in their highest potential based on whatever their, intentions and goals are. I think that space not only helps me sort of clear whatever emotional noise might be there, but it also just gives me good focus and presence with my clients because I've taken care of my own space first.
I like the distinction between setting our intentions versus our goals, which I think we intellectually understand, but I think often what we end up doing is just creating a list of things to do, which, has its own place. But I like that you're calling us to task a little bit and saying, be clear about what's what and which of those things can provide the nutrients we need for our day. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
What is Dr. Aprilia West reading? I'm so curious. What's on your bedside table?
So many books. I mean, I'm guilty of, being like a serial part of a book reader. And it's because I have so many brilliant colleagues who write books who I want to read all of them. But the parts of books I'm reading right now include Imaginable by Jane McGonigal, which I mentioned earlier. And then a very nerdy academic book called Relational Frame Theory, which has to do with how we literally language our lives and how that impacts behavior. And then on the lighter side, I just restarted a novel that was recommended by a colleague whose taste I trust implicitly, called Why Fish Don't Exist. And it was written by a Radio Lab host, Lulu Miller. So I'm very excited about that one. Yeah.
Okay. You'll have to come back and tell us how that went, but we'll have those in the show notes for sure. And then it's hard to have you here and not take advantage of your wisdom and your knowledge, but share a simple mind shift hack for us when it comes to behavior change to cultivate thriving relationships. What can we do to cultivate behavior within ourselves to be a good friend and to create thriving relationships?
When I think about relationships, I think in terms of agreements. One hack could be to take time to write down what you want other people to be able to count on you for, and then what you want to be able to count on other people for, and then use that as a filter for the people in your life. I think it can be really clarifying for a lot of people to see, oh, I'm in relationship with people who really, who I can't really count on for the things that matter most to me, or wow, I'm really not showing up in my relationships the way I thought I was, and I'm not offering the very thing that I either want and expect or even receive from my friends. So I think that can be a quick mind shift.
Okay, and I have to ask perhaps a dumb question, but no dumb questions.
Nope.
Are you suggesting that this is something that we do like to ourselves, for ourselves, or are you suggesting that this is something we share with a friend?
Well, if you do it yourself and you still want the friendship, then I can't think of anything more powerful than having that conversation with them. I could even do it with you. Hey, I know we've known each other for, what is it, 20 years?
Yeah, I think it's longer. I think it's 30 years.
Okay, 30 years, and we've never really had a conversation about what would you like to count on from me?
Yeah.
Could I also ask for what would be most meaningful to have from you? And just to use that as a way to almost reset, it has a lot to do with living intentionally.
I love that. And such intimacy that can be born of that, right? And also it's okay if people can't, but if they can't answer the call, then you know where you stand. And so there's benefit to that too.
Yeah. Isn't that one of the benefits of being in our stage of life is
Yes.
That it's okay if other people's strings aren't vibrating when yours vibrate. It's not bad or wrong, and you don't take it personally.
You don't take it personally. And I would even go so far as to say it's a form of respect to share with somebody else what you're capable of bringing to a relationship, or what you have capacity for in this particular season of your life, versus I think there was a season in my life, I'll say, where I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So it was just, I'll keep trying. But often you keep failing or falling short. And so this season of a little bit of, I don't care how people see me in a healthy way, not in a, I don't care about my fellow humans,
Right.
but I'm not impacted negatively if somebody doesn't enjoy my company or like me or like what I have to say. There's freedom in that. And conversely, again, I think it's a way of respecting other people by being honest about those things. So that's great. I love that. Thank you. And then what are you loving about this season of life? What are you enjoying about this middle third? What is it bringing to you?
In addition to, what I alluded to about, just caring less what other people think or how they see me, which is really freeing, and being less self-conscious or armored up as I was when I was younger, and I was more surviving than thriving, really. I really love the wisdom that my friends in my age cohort group have at this stage. I just think we're so much more interesting than we were when we were younger. And so I'm really loving, leaning in deeper with people. And like a lot of people during the pandemic, my friend group shifted and changed and then shifted and changed again. And what I'm finding is I'm tapping in with people where there's a lot more resonance and mutual interests, and in a way that just feels really vitalizing.
It makes sense. And it's great when we can recognize those things and then continue to pursue that direction, whatever it is. And then I have to ask you, because, this podcast is called Liberty Road.
Yeah.
What is this latest iteration of Aprilia, being a psychologist and an executive coach and working with the clients that you're working with? How has it liberated you?
For me, the most liberating part of my training and my work and my experience with people has been the demystification of human experience. I have always been a really deep feeler, and I think it was confusing for me in my earlier life, and as I've already said, I'm fascinated too by why we are the way we are. And my training has really helped me understand people's experience and behavior in a way that makes so much sense now. I sometimes think of it as we're all at a dance party, but it's largely a silent disco where we all have our own headphones and, we're listening to our own music. And so on the outside, when you're looking at people, they might look really strange because the moves they're making really don't correspond with, the moves you're making. And if you're listening to Sade and they're listening to Green Day, it's potentially going to be very provocative. But just understanding, I guess, the power of context has made me way more empathetic and just more curious about other people's experiences and choices instead of feeling reactive about it. And as a professional, it's also given me, a focus about what's possible when people work on their own individual contexts and even just our collective context at large. I think of myself as a pro-social Imagineer, meaning that I'm really just passionate about how we shift our context so that we can all move together in a way that really cares for and works for everyone and inspires us more to be a part of this world.
In this particular climate, I can't think of a more needed resource. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for your commitment to giving us the tools and the resources we need to both be our best selves, to navigate change, and also to recognize where we come from and what narratives we've been believing. it's a gift that we have you here on the podcast, and we've had a minute to access that brilliant brain of yours. So thank you, Aprilia. I appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me, Netta. It's such a pleasure.
Well, the pleasure's ours. And Liberty listeners, thank you guys for hanging out with Dr. Aprilia West and with me. We will have everything she mentioned in the show notes. And if you are an after school member, don't forget to dig in there, and you can check out firsthand the workshop that she'll be offering us in after school. Until next week, we'll see you guys then. Bye for now. Liberty Road is broadcast on all platforms: Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcast, and more. If you like what you've heard, please follow, rate, and review Liberty Road on Apple Podcast and Spotify. It helps us to know if these episodes are inspiring and equipping you to move into your middle third with intention. Liberty Road is created by executive producer Netta Jones, supervising producer Elizabeth Wyndham, producer Julia Wyndham, and music by Jack Jones.
Need new glasses or want a fresh new style? Warby Parker has you covered. Glasses start at just $95, including anti-reflective, scratch-resistant prescription lenses that block 100% of UV rays. Every frame's designed in-house with a huge selection of styles for every face shape. And with Warby Parker's free home try-on program, you can order 5 pairs to try at home for free. Shipping is free both ways, too. Go to warbyparker.com/covered to try 5 pairs of frames at home for free. warbyparker.com/covered.
Every year, one thing is always predictable. Postage costs go up. Stamps.com gives you crazy discounts of up to 89% off USPS and UPS services, so your business will barely notice the change. Stamps